In this video, I'm going to walk you through running SQL queries and connecting to a database and extracting data directly through VBA. And so like this table right here is the equivalent of running this query, clicking execute. And so all this data is the equivalent of what VBA can spit out to you here. I will give you the caveat that Excel over the years has gotten a lot better at this. They have implanted Power Query directly in the application now. It used to be an add-on. And so this Power Query is a very nice tool. I use it all the time, but sometimes it does lack some functionality, and it is good for running just your query and manipulating the data after you get a query. VBA allows you to do so much more, and I'll show you. VBA on its own can't connect to a database. It needs a few extra requirements. The first one is a reference to Microsoft ActiveX data objects library. And that is something in VBA. So it's already installed on your machine if you have Excel. You just have to add it to the project as a reference in the project. And the next requirement is a driver. And I'm going to use the Microsoft OLEDB driver. And I'm using versions 18. I've had issues with versions 19, so I recommend getting 18, and I'll link it in the description below. But you'll need a driver. And a few years ago, the SQL native client was a common one that you could use, but Microsoft doesn't support that one anymore. And the OLEDB driver is the modern one to use. And so let's get started. Running queries in Excel VBA is a fairly straightforward process. It's 5 steps. You got to open the connection, you run the query, you parse or copy the results, you close the connection, and you release the resources. Number 4 and 5 there are very important because if you leave connections open, that can cause headaches on the actual database engine side. So the first thing I'm going to do is go into my Visual Basic, come over to my project, and I'm just going to insert a couple modules. And I'm going to call this one SQL module. That's where I'm going to put all my reusable functions related to the actual connection to the database. Call this one import module. And that's where I'm going to put all my SQL statements that will run to query the database. So now that I've got my modules in there, I'm going to add that reference that I mentioned. So it's going to be the go to tools and then references. And then here's all the different things that are available. And so the Microsoft ActiveX Data Object 6.1 library, I'm going to check that box and click OK. Now, if you don't have 6.1, 2.8 is good too. The ones before 2.8 are not going to be nearly as robust. 6.1 is the best, and 2.8 has basically the same stuff. And I don't know why it jumped versions so much because these two are basically the same, but this one has a few more extra functionality to it. So I'm just going to add that reference, and then I can start creating my code. So the first thing that I'm going to do is create the connection to the database and so to the database engine. And so I'm going to create a function that does that so I can reuse it. Okay, so here's my function. I call it just create SQL connection. It's going to declare a variable. And now I'm using ADODB, and that's what that reference gives me. And so if I ADODB, the fact that it's in there, and then if I do dot, and then I can do all the different IntelliSense, that's what the reference gives me. If I didn't have that reference in there, it wouldn't know what ADODB is. But with the reference, I can actually use this and even declare variables with it. And I'm going to declare my connection, and I'm going to set the connection string. And then I'm just going to return the SQL connection to whatever function calls this. Now, this doesn't open the connection. This is just my generic connection. It creates the connection of essentially the parameters of the connection. And it uses this connection string, and I'll link below the connection string stuff, but the provider is the driver. That's what's installed on your computer that's actually going to do the work to go ask the database for the information. And so the MSOLEDB driver is a very standard one. It does really well with Microsoft databases. So I'm going to use that driver to actually do the query. Now I'm using LocalDB, SQL LocalDB. That's LocalDB is a way to have a SQL database on your computer. It's local to your computer, so you're not going to be able to remote into it or anything like that. but it has full functionality of SQL. Now the database sizes are limited and it can't do like integration services and things like that, but it can. If you just need a database, a relational database, LocalDB is a great local database and has the full speed and functionality of SQL, and it's not nearly as finicky as Access. And I'm using trusted connection equals yes. And what that tells it is to use the Windows authentication, whatever I'm logged in as Windows, to log in to this database server. Now, if you wanted to use a SQL username and password, you can do username equals this, password equals this. But the bad side of that is you have to put the password in plain text there unless you want to use VBA to kind of mask it somehow. But I'm just going to use Windows authentication to get into it because it's a local DB. It's installed on this computer. And then I just return the SQL connection, and that's where I'm going to be able to reuse it. And so the next thing I'm going to do is create a function that'll actually run a SQL command. And I'm going to take a parameter of the SQL statement. That's going to be the actual select statement. And it's going to be a string. And I'm also going to take a parameter of the paste range. And that's where I'm actually going to paste the data. And so the first thing I'm going to do is actually grab that connection. Okay, so there I'm getting the connection. That's going to be essentially just calling this function to get my information. And I'm going to open that connection. So I declare it. I'm using an ADODBD type variable. I'm setting that object to my SQL connection, and then I'm opening the connection to the database. That's actually going to send that request or connection and create that connection to the database server. So now that I've got the connection open, I need to actually create a command that will read that information. So here we have it. I'm using an ADODB.command, and so that's a special type from the ActiveX reference. I'm just declaring it as O command, and then I'm setting it to a new one. So I'm essentially creating an object of an ADODB command, and then I'm going to set its active connection to this connection that I have open. I'm going to set it as a text command, so it's not a stored procedure or something like that. And then I'm going to set the command text to my SQL that I have passed through the variable. So now that actually creates it, and the command is ready to go, but it hasn't been actually sent yet. So the command is ready, and now I need to send it. So that's going to do here. Okay, so now I have my execute command, and so I'm using a record set, an ADODB record set. That is the standard result of a command. And so I'm going to actually use it. I'm going to set it to ocommand.execute. So I've prepared my command, and then I execute it, and storing the returned into this record set. And the record set is just going to be essentially the data table that it's returning to you. So now that I've got my data, now I just need to paste it into the actual spreadsheet. Okay, so there I have it. And so I'm going to be using this copy from record set function that's part of any range. And so like it's not related to the ActiveX. If I created a random variable copy from record set, it's actually part of Excel by itself and just part of this range. But I'm going to use that copy from record set. So I have my record set and I'm going to copy it, and that's going to copy the data. But the thing is, copy from record set does not include the headers. And so this is where I'm going to do a little bit of extra work on it. I'm going to go and I'm going to cycle through the headers and paste them into my first row. And then I'm going to actually paste this on the next row. So if I'm passing cell A1 through my paste range, I'm going to essentially, and I'm starting from 0 or index of 0 because record sets are 0-based indexes. They're not 1, 2, or 1-based. They start at 0. And so I'm going to start at 0, go to the total amount of fields. So if there's 9 columns, there's going to be 9 fields. And I'm going to subtract 1 because I'm starting at 0. So if there's 9 fields, you want 0 to 8. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take, if I'm in cell A1, I'm going to offset it 0 rows because I want not to move any rows. I'm going to stay on the same row, but I am going to cycle based on the column. Now, the first one is going to be 00. So cell A1 is going to be set to the column name. And then, so I'm using my record set fields, and it's going to be the column name. So first one is 0, column 0 is name is this, column 1 is name is this. And so it's going to cycle through those and paste those into my first row. And then I'm going to offset one row, and then I'm going to do my copy from record set. That way I paste my column headers, and then I paste the actual data. And the last thing to do is to release the resources. And so there it is. And so what the record set, I'm going to close it because I've executed a command. I'm going to close that record set, and then I'm going to close the connection, and that's going to close this connection up here because all this time, once you start executing, you have created a connection that's going to stay alive. And so you want to close that connection. And then this is just extra cleanup stuff just to make sure 100% that stuff is actually truly cleared out. This part is probably not 100% necessary, but it's better safe than sorry. So I'm just going to essentially remove any values from those variables. And so now let's go and actually call these functions and do the import. So I'm going to go over to my import module. I'm going to create a procedure called import data. Then I'm going to first do where I'm going to paste the data. Okay, and so that's just a little cleanup. I'm creating a worksheet variable, setting it to my whatever active sheet I'm on. And then I'm just going to clear out anything that's there. So if ever I refresh this, I want to make sure I'm deleting everything that's there. And so next, I'm going to have to create my SQL statement that's actually going to generate the table. Okay, so there it is. I just created a string variable, and this is just a fairly basic select statement from the AdventureWorks database. They have these tables. I'm selecting around 9 columns, I think, from the sales order header table and joining it to the sales order detail. But I'm just doing a fairly simple select statement, and I'm doing it for a 2-year span. So now that I have my select statement, I'm going to actually call my macro from the SQL module. Okay, so that's as simple as just going to call that module, and it's going to pass my SQL statement string variable, and my paste range is going to be on starting A1. Now, I don't have to put in the entire range, like 9 columns worth. I could just put that copy from record set is pretty nice that you could just put the top left cell that you want the data to be pasted into. And just last but not least, I'm going to do some cleanup. So I'm just going to say columns.auto fit, just so make sure all the columns get the correct width. And one last thing, a little syntax error there. And so now the only thing left to do is to test it. So I'm going to pull this over here, expand it, and I'm just going to click the play button. And as you can see, it gets all the data and puts it into a table. And so that is how you can use VBA to run SQL queries and put the data into Excel. And now in the next video, I'm going to show you where you can actually extend that, because right now this does about the same thing as the Power Query version. But now in the next one, I will show you how you can actually extend it and get some real benefits out of using VBA over using these built-in functions. I hope you like this, and if you like this video, please like it and subscribe it, and I will see you in the next one.